I see companies here being spun out and there's lots of technical work, and that is really important, but ultimately you need to bring money in. I do wonder if there's enough good sales, business development, and they're really important to the health of the business.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey, and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode, I talk to amazing research adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research adjacent space is where the real magic happens. This week I have a fascinating chat with Emma Perfect. Emma is currently a business development manager at Heriot-Watt University, but until very recently she worked in the small business startup world. Emma shares some very honest insights about the highs and lows of this career path. It's taken her from lone company scientist to CEO as the businesses she worked for explored detection methodologies and followed the money from glowing fungi to dental decay to oil and gas pipelines. It's a real rollercoaster ride through what it takes to succeed and what happens when you don't. Listen on to hear her story. Welcome along, Emma. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I wonder if we could begin our conversation with you telling us about what it is that you do.
I am currently a business development manager at Heriot-Watt University. So I sit in a broad team called Business and Enterprise, and we are the kind of one of the external facing parts of the university. So we connect academics to the wider world to try and build an ecosystem that helps make better research.
Excellent. Oh, I think there's going to be lots there for us to talk about as we go through. But I wonder if you could tell me about how you ended up doing this business development role.
Yeah, so I've only done this role for a year, and that's the first time I've ever worked for a university. And I currently work in health and care. So I look after all our health and care researchers, of which it's about 120 I look after. But I've never really done health and care work anymore. So I've come here by a slightly unusual route. So I am originally a biologist and I have a PhD in molecular plant pathology, and I used to study a fungus of barley plants. Now, when I thought about this earlier, I realised that maybe I chose this because I couldn't quite decide what I wanted to do. It's got a bit of molecular biology, a bit of microscopy, can decide between plants and fungi. So it was quite a general PhD, clearly just interested in lots of bits of science. So I did a PhD, but I recognised fairly early on that I wasn't going to go down an academic track. Not a particularly great bench scientist. I have no patience, that attention to detail. But I really, really wanted to do something applied. So I love science. That was really great. But I kind of wanted to do something a bit more applied, a bit more closer to being a tangible result rather than my obscure plant fungus, just a very long way from being useful for anyone, really. So I leave a PhD, and I happened to see a job advert for a small business in Edinburgh that needed a scientist. They just received some money. It was a startup business. They just received some money, and they were looking for their very first scientist. And they ideally wanted someone who'd worked on fungus, which isn't that common a job role.
No.
Really. Nowadays. So I saw this and I was like, oh, I really want this job. So I was really fortunate and I got the job, and then I became this company's first scientist. So I helped set up the labs and begin work. And they were interested in making fungal biosensors. So using fungi to detect toxicity, essentially. So it was supposed to help with drug screening and toxicity. So my job was to modify these fungi to make them glow. And then the amount of glowing or how they glowed could tell us something about the matrix they were in. So were they in a toxic one, or were they in a particular chemical that changed the membrane in a certain way that led to this kind of light response? So it was really interesting. And when I joined that business, I really knew nothing, I realised. So when I turned up the first day, they gave me this big stack of patents, and they said, look through these patents, compare them to this patents from another company, tell us the difference. But I don't think I'd ever read a patent before.
No.
Nothing. And I don't think I even knew when they said, go order this stuff, you'll find the purchase order stuff over here. And I was like, I think from my university environment a long time ago, we weren't exposed to any of that. So no. It was a brave new world.
But it must have been quite exciting to be in at the very beginning.
It was brilliant, although I think we were all quite new and green. I don't think any of us really knew enough about probably anything. But then maybe if you know too much, you don't do these things. So
maybe, yeah.
Naivety is good. So it was great. I still think I hadn't changed, and I still wasn't a particularly great bench scientist. So my making fungi glow wasn't all that successful. And we did a bit of growing, and there were better bench scientists than me that came along and did a far better job. I really like planning experiments out. And I really like thinking about all the results and looking through them. But I can plan experiments 10 times faster than I can actually do them. And I just think it took, I was just
So you enjoy it more as an intellectual exercise then than as an actual practical
I've just worked with people who are just brilliant at it. They pay attention, they're good at detail, they're just so excellent, where I just was not that excellent. So it turns out in the end, I did become the chief scientific officer. So I got to do the bits I was better at. I got to think about what was needed and what was important and what did the results mean, and planning out that work, which was excellent. But in the meantime, the company had changed quite a lot. We were small. There wasn't really enough money in what we wanted to do. It's amazing. People just didn't want to throw money at glowing fungi. Who
doesn't want glowing fungi? I don't understand.
Clearly. So it turns out at this point in time, which was like 20 years ago, there was a bit more money in things like oil and gas. The North Sea still had quite a lot of R&D going on, big operators, and they all had some challenges in detecting things, in toxicity of fluids. They wanted to make sure what they were putting over into the sea wasn't going to damage the sea. They had lots of interesting challenges, but they had always gone about it in a traditional way. So they had lots of chemical companies and they did lots of traditional chemistry. And one day our business spoke to them at an event and they said, well, we've got nothing like this, which is unsurprising since there's not that many glowing fungi and biotech businesses. They said, could we do some biotechnology in our business to help us do this better? And they gave us some money to do R&D projects. So we were paid by them to look at how certain chemicals they put in oil wells and oil pipelines flow through systems, and to look at what goes overboard and see if it was toxic. And some of this was kind of related to the fungi and some of it was brand new chemistry. So the company I was with, we had to evolve to follow the money before we ran out of money. So that was one good way of keeping our science going. So we became more of a kind of detection house, I would say. People came to us and said, I want to detect something. Can you help us do it? And we were experts in light-based technologies. We did lots of fluorescence, luminescence, things like that, which had lots of advantages for doing it at the point of where you take a sample. It was fast and it was inexpensive. So it was really good. We were truly taking life science technology and applying it to the oil and gas for it, like the first time. It was really interesting and really good. And we were also at that time approached by a dentist. So he was an academic dentist in Dundee. And he said, well, I've got a great idea too. I would like to look at tooth decay. And his argument was, well, teeth are made of calcium. At the moment, you go to a dentist and when they see a hole, they drill it and fill it. Could we not detect that decay way before it makes a hole by looking at calcium? Because surely if that tooth's decaying, it's releasing loads of calcium.
Yeah.
And we helped him do that. So we helped him detect that loss of calcium from the tooth. And we could make these beautiful maps of decay on a tooth and you can help guide where to do things. So we had a really diverse portfolio of technologies. We did things in environmental biotechnology, oil and gas, and this dental diagnostics product, which for me as the chief scientist was okay because I was using the same fluorescence, luminescence and other technologies to detect stuff. But for our commercial team was rather challenging because the way you sell to oil and gas is quite different to maybe the way you sell in dentistry, and one needs lots of clinical work and one needs other things. So for them, it was a really tough job. And in the end, we had to decide what we were going to be as a business.
The other,
We had to pick. So we had to also, as a small business, we just didn't have the money to do clinical trials work for dentistry products. And we just couldn't afford it. So that product got spun out and it's now with our Edinburgh-based business that's doing amazing things with it.
Oh, cool.
and we kept the oil and gas. So from a fungal plant pathologist, I suddenly became a CEO of an oil and gas chemical monitoring company. Really, I had no idea how oil was taken out of the ground. I thought you just drilled a hole and oil flowed.
Just came out.
I did all those TV programs and all the oil came out everywhere.
I think you see these big fountains of oil coming out of the ground. Yeah.
It's a little bit more complicated than that. I had a lot to learn. Spoke to a lot of engineers, and we did a lot of work with chemists because they use lots of chemistry to keep these flowing, these pipelines flowing. So for many, many years, I ran a little company that sold products to the global oil and gas industry. So I've been to the Middle East a lot. I've been to America, anywhere that had a pipeline that was corroding. So it was had water in it, might cause corrosion, you might get leaks. We would be there to say, well, look, you have to put chemicals in to protect this pipeline so nothing leaks. You should be using our products to help you monitor those chemicals. So that's what we sold and what we did for years and years. And there were challenges, there was lots of difficult things. Ultimately, it was amazing. I had the best job in the world. I loved it. Working for a small business is amazing, difficult. And it became increasingly difficult because we didn't make enough money.
Oh, yeah.
When you spend more on R&D than you actually bring in through income, it does make it difficult. So we had to close that business after many years of it running. And we did sell some of our products in our portfolio. There's one still with an Aberdeen company that's still helping protect oil fields around the world. I took one of those products and started my own business with it, which I did for a couple of years. Turns out November 2019 was a difficult time to start a business.
Indeed.
A few years later with COVID, when we were trying to sell and work as a global business, it was not easy to be doing work across the whole world. So it was fine. We've done it for a few years. The business still exists. But we were looking at one particular kind of molecule. I think I knew everybody in the world who was interested in this one particular molecule.
Yeah.
And the world had got quite small. I thought about corroding pipelines for a very long time. And I just wanted to do something a bit different. I kind of wanted to use my brain again and learn something new. So I sat at home and I thought, well, where can I go where I can learn something new? And I thought, wow. There's a lot going on in universities because there's heaps of research and exciting things that happen in universities. So I applied for a job at Heriot-Watt to work in business development. So I don't do any bench work. I don't do any actual science anymore, which is something of a shame, but I do every day get to work with amazing academics. So many projects. So I have gone, and I think you have to be careful what you wish for. So I've gone from wishing I could use my brain a bit more and learn something new to every single day leaving work going, there's just so much to learn in the world and so many things being worked on. So that is how I got to this point.
Oh, goodness me. Yeah. So how have you found, I know you've said just there, you touched on, you've gone from wanting to learn new things to being overwhelmed with new things. Otherwise, how have you found that transition from industry to academia? What are the kind of similarities or differences between those work environments?
I guess for me, the biggest difference is the size. My last business had 3 of us, and now I work in a university with thousands of people. Just the size is to navigate those different groups, those different ways of working, different academics. Universities aren't really like a business, I guess, in some ways, because there are lots of little groups that are kind of amalgamation together. And just learning to navigate and meet so many new people is I love it, but wow, it's so different. Working from home in a virtual way with 3 of us is just black and white. So I like it. I do like it a lot. And I do like academics an awful lot. I love their passion and their interest, and they're doing amazing things. I just have a lot to learn about structures and decision making and all the rest of it I haven't had to think of for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So maybe thinking about the current job that you're in now, could you maybe give an example or two of the kinds of projects that you're working on at Heriot-Watt?
So generally, I'm here to help academics connect in the wider world. So although it's called a business development manager, I don't really like the term because I work in health and care. I could spend as much time trying to reach out to find clinicians or healthcare professionals and the NHS as I might with industry partners and other things like that. So it's a bit more about kind of ecosystem building. I might in a day get contacted by an academic who says, I've got an idea for smart incontinence pad. Will you please go help me find out, well, what might this market size be and who might be interested in? Could you find me some patients who might be interested in feeding in as to what it should feel like or look like? I'm no expert in smart incontinence pads, so I have to go do it. And then half an hour later, someone might email to say, oh, I've got a funding bid going in quantum healthcare. Can you please try and reach out and help me find industry partners who'd like to join a working group and input their experiences? And for that, I have to go and say, well, I might need a little lesson in quantum physics, because really electron spin and things like this is not my core expertise. So you're going to have to help me understand. And I might get 5 of those academics in a day asking me for support and help. And the next day I might go to events and meet other colleagues from other universities who are trying to build networks and research. So it's incredibly varied. And I guess that's why it's such a good job. I work in a very different team to my commercialization colleagues. So we're parallel teams. So I look at business development and industry and clinical partnerships. They do a lot more of the startups and spin-outs, but sometimes they do let me go along to their events and talk to their budding entrepreneurs. They don't let me go too often because when I start talking about my own past experiences, I put people off. But sometimes they will let me go and talk about businesses and startups and all that exciting things. So I get to do a little bit of that sometimes too.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Does sound like really varied. And as you say, if on a day-to-day basis you're working with people doing so many different things, that must be real intellectual stimulation.
It is. You don't ever get to go too far into the details. So I guess that's the difference, is you're there as a supporting role. I do not have say in what their research is in a sense. I can help them say, well, look, the market says there's a gap. Maybe you could think about filling this gap. But ultimately, I have very little say, and as it should be, really. I'm not an academic. I'm not a professor in any of these areas, but I do get to learn a lot, and it's great.
Yeah. Oh, really interesting. Thank you. I wonder if I could ask you about having, I think you've touched on some of these things already, and maybe drawing either from your business experience or from your current role, a few things that you're really proud of, a couple of things that you're really proud of, or real career highs.
Yeah. I guess the thing I liked the most was when somebody came with an idea and a challenge they'd not managed to solve, and my team and I would get together and we'd have some ideas. And then essentially you've managed to take something from concept all the way through to a product that you send out the door. And then that person might write back and say, well, this is amazing. You've saved my pipeline. And that is best thing ever. Or with dentistry, we might have stopped all these people getting their teeth filled. Ultimately, it's a long road, but that going from an idea to something tangible that you've sold and someone's written back to say this was really useful. It didn't happen as often as I would have liked, but it did happen, and that's just the best feeling ever. It's something you've just thought of, you've created, you've gone through that pain of product development, and it's made a difference to somebody's business. Is just excellent. Definitely high.
And something that you said that when you went right back to your PhD, that was what you were really craving, that feeling that the work that you were doing was making a difference.
Yeah, I really wanted to do some applied things where you could see some tangible results. I must just be an impatient person, but I really just wanted to see something make a difference.
Out in the real world. Yeah, fantastic. And I can imagine that must feel really good, really satisfying when that does happen. Yeah.
Definitely.
And again, just to give you, I think you've already touched on quite a few of these, but whether there's anything you wanted to add. I mean, going through processes of, companies running out of money, having to close them down, that must have been really, really challenging. Are those the most challenging things you think you faced in your career, or are there other things that stand out?
It wasn't a good day having to close the business and make everyone redundant. I have to say it was probably a low point. I guess to that though, we had a plan to be acquired and we had a path, and we were very clear, or as clear as we could be, that this was our path. We were going to be acquired, or it was all going to go horribly wrong. It was a good ambition to have. It just didn't quite happen. But I guess
so. Acquired meaning being bought out by a bigger company. Yes.
Yeah. It was too hard to be a little oil and gas company. Well, you need to be a big boy to really sell widely across the world. We were too small. So it was a good plan. It just didn't work. But I guess that one, I felt really bad. It was awful, but I tried to make sure everyone knew. So there was communication that this might happen. So it was bad. I guess it's the same with anyone's job, whatever they do. I think working in a small group of people, sometimes good and sometimes difficult. We often had people work for the business, and we were really small. The biggest I think we ever were 14 people. We were always a relatively small business, and we sometimes had people who'd come from very big businesses that might come and join us, or just cultural fit didn't work. And I always found that harder, trying to manage the expectations and the cultural fit of people within a small team. You're like a family, and if you have someone who just doesn't enjoy it, then that was always really difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be. Yeah. And did you have anything in particular you found helped with navigating those kind of situations?
No, my other colleagues probably. They were slightly better at it than I was.
Fair enough. That's why you're in a team. Yeah.
I totally believe in that division of labour. People are good at different things. I'm well aware of my limitations, but if you can build a team, then you can fill all your gaps together. So I really do strongly believe that that's what is needed in teams. I think that's also interesting because at the early days of the business, we were very, very technical. And then when we got a lot of investment in, we had to grow, and we had to put in other teams. We had to put in sales teams and operations teams. And I always find that really difficult because there are different personality types, I think, between very technical people, and salespeople are often much more exuberant and extroverted, and actually trying to dovetail these different personality types was very difficult, and I'm not sure we ever totally managed that.
No, that's something as well that I imagine you see in universities too. Different, or certainly I have very different personality types and different roles.
And I do wonder if universities, that is something partly to do with the structure. I think to become a professor and manage a group, you have to be super competitive, super ambitious, quite focused, single-minded, and then you've got lots of these groups all rubbing up next door to each other. I think it is a really interesting dynamic that I suspect is relatively unique to university life. So yes, but then I guess life is full of people and full of personality conflict that you have to try and navigate. So.
Yeah, this is true. Well, perhaps those things we've been thinking about there lead us nicely on to my magic wand question. So if you had a magic wand, what would you change about the world that you work in? Either the world that you work in now, or the kind of small startup business world that you worked in, I guess, if you're quite new to where you are now.
Yeah, no, it's difficult, isn't it? I think for translation, I think more ultimately, I'd have a wand that did a bit more translation of science. I always think there's quite a lot of work goes on in early stage, but when you work for a small business and you live on making it onto the marketplace, it is hard to raise money and get your prototypes into full manufacturing, get everything certified, regulate through all the regulations. I think a magic wand for a big pot of money to help people do that and get things commercialized would be good. I guess the other thing, it's a slightly dull answer though, because everyone always says it, because it is a real problem. I guess personally, I think it would be great to do more science in schools. This might reflect the fact I have 2 primary school age children. Don't think they do a great deal of science or get exposed to a great deal of science. And I think it would be great that all primary school age kids could get their hands on lots of interesting kit, get lots of people in telling them about science and do it. Neither of my children are at all interested in science. I would hesitate. I've got one wants to be a bus driver and one wants to be a fashion designer, but maybe there's a bit of science could cover both. But I do think it would be great for more people to learn a little bit about science. I guess if I had a wand, I would love to buy like a community hub building. It would do a bit of fun science. You could go and do like an after school club science and like a community science. You could have like a cafe scientific and get people coming. Instead of just being a book club, it would be like you come read a journal and talk about it, or you've heard something on the BBC News website and you can go do it. I think that would just be awesome to do a bit more of science that everyone enjoys.
That sounds like a fantastic idea. Something, a woman after my own heart as well. That's the kind of stuff I used to do. And there are people trying to do that. There's things like the STEM Ambassadors program. There used to be STEM clubs in schools and things like that. A lot of the funding's kind of dried up for that sort of thing. So there's not as much of it happening as there used to be.
I think so. It does need that magic wand.
Yeah. That sounds like an excellent plan. Just to come back to your magic wand for more translation of research and getting into the world, are there specific things that you think would help make that happen? Are there things that are real barriers at the moment beyond funding? Because that's always a problem.
Yeah,
but is there legislative or?
I think on health and care regulation side is challenging. It's so complicated and expensive. Yeah, there's specific things in the area I work in that really could do with support and help or money or something else. Other people than me have written about this far more. There's a Logan report and everything else. In my business, I guess we probably should have having more people around you in the ecosystem to help. It's all very well starting up lots of businesses, but are there really enough people to be good CEOs or good non-execs, or even everyone talks about technical, and I see companies here being spun out and there's lots of technical work, and that is really important, but ultimately you need to bring money in. I do wonder if there's enough good sales, business development. It's kind of a much underrepresented group, I think, and they're really important to the health of the business. So is there enough being done to create a community to support businesses and from those people as well? I don't know, but I suspect there are things that could be done there for a supportive ecosystem.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So the need for more kind of business skills and leadership rather than just the technical knowledge side of things.
Yeah, I just don't think you could ignore it. And there's no point once you've got your product to find out then that you should have built it differently or done your market assessment differently. And you can't always just think about technical you need more than that in a business. And I do wonder if there's enough people out there with experience to help. I think if we had a few more, maybe that gap in translation would be different.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think, that makes a lot of sense, actually, is that it's all well and good having the ideas and the science, but there's so much more involved to running a business than just having a good idea. Yeah.
And I can say from ones that haven't worked particularly well, that's where we fell over. Science was hard and we had problems, but ultimately things like supply chain, understanding your supply chain, which no one ever really talked to me about, that's where they generally almost all fell over.
Oh, interesting.
You're actually selling to what they want. So have you understood this? People think about enough. So I do wonder if more can be done in those areas too.
Yeah. Oh, well, maybe those are skills and connections you can start to bring in the role that you're in now and join up.
Well, maybe, hopefully, if they let me talk to any of their startups.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think we should start to wrap up our conversation now, but thank you so much for coming along to chat to me. You are certainly my first guest that I've had on who has worked for a very small startup company. So really interesting to get that perspective as well and learn a bit more, because it's a world I don't know much about at all either, as you can probably tell. So if anybody wants to track you down, where is the best place to find you?
LinkedIn is definitely the best place to find me.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'll get a link to your LinkedIn profile and put that in the show notes. So it just remains to say thank you very much for coming along and having a chat today.
Fabulous. Lovely to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. If you're listening in a podcast app, please check you're subscribed and then use the links under the episode to find full show notes and to follow the podcast on LinkedIn, Twitter or Instagram. Also, make sure that you're subscribed to the Research Adjacent Roundup newsletter. You can also find all the links and other episodes at www.researchadjacent.com. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.